There are many unanswered questions about the destruction of the 3 skyscrapers on 9/11. One has to do with the intense heat, and another the uniform downward acceleration. There's plenty of evidence of temperatures high enough to melt steel, including molten spheres of iron, melted steel full of holes in the FEMA report, melted beams seen by NIST, melted handguns in the museum, fused elements of steel and concrete, and many eyewitness accounts.
You'd get down below and you'd see molten steel running down the channel rails.
So the question is, what heat melted that steel? Office fires and jet fuel can't melt steel beams. But rather than addressing the evidence, most ignore or dismiss it.
Jet fuel melting steel beams, they don't have to melt them, guys. They don't have to melt anything. They don't have to liquefy steel, but you can bend steel with your bare hands if it gets over like 1800 degrees. That's not very hot in the realm of, fire, especially when fueled by kerosene from jet fuel. I mean, it can compromise the integrity of any structure. Trust me.
He's wrong. The steel did melt. So the question remains, where did the heat come from? And any steel compromise would be up where the fires were, sagging down, but not suddenly exploding outward in a shower of dust. Others have posted experiments proving the obvious, that if you heat steel red hot, it gets very weak.
So I am taking time out of my busy day to try to put to rest one of the more moronic things I have seen on the internet lately, and that's saying something. Through my Facebook feed, I saw yet again that old tired argument, that question. Jet fuel only burns at 1500 degrees, and since steel melts at 2700 degrees, 9/11 was a conspiracy. I am so sick and tired of this argument. I put this in the oven. Now watch this. I'm going to take my pinky finger, half-inch solid steel. Check it out. It's a freaking noodle. Your argument is invalid. Get over it. Find a job.
Most people, and certainly thousands of architects and engineers, already knew this. So what can we learn from his experiment if we apply it to the towers on 9/11? Well, if all the steel in the tower lobby was red hot, and there was a horizontal force like a strong wind, the towers should have tipped over. But where was the heat? It was way up on the upper floors. The lower floors remained stone cold and very strong as the people evacuated. And how did the towers fall? The upper floors accelerated down into the larger, cold, and stronger structure below. And the only force, we are told, that caused this remarkable motion was downward from gravity alone. But what happened when the blacksmith applied a downward force?
It's very hot, but not melted. Obviously, it is not melted.
The steel rod didn't accelerate down like the top of the towers. And he's right. Obviously, it's not melted. But that's what the saying, jet fuel can't melt steel beams, is all about. Those fires couldn't have melted that steel. I'm not a blacksmith, but I can heat steel just as hot. Let's conduct a more realistic experiment by heating a rod about where the heat really was in the towers, and see if the top accelerates down by gravity alone. Obviously, the top doesn't accelerate down by gravity alone, even if I hammer it down. People don't understand the jet fuel meme and think suddenly they alone have solved the problem of the tower's fall.
But if you hold this up as a reason for conspiracy, you are an idiot.
I might be, but these guys who were there are not. Research and understand the issues, and then try to find any realistic experiment using steel and concrete that demonstrates the destruction of those towers by fire and gravity alone. But you won't, because it's impossible, which is why nobody, no university, no engineers, NIST, FEMA, no one, has been able to provide any real experiment that demonstrates the motions observed, and why none of the official investigations were ever able to address these simple, unanswered questions. And while he may not care,
If it was conspiracy, I do not care.
some of us do care about all those that were murdered when the towers were intentionally blown up.